There is a pass in the mountains of Mexico where, 500 years ago, a navy went by on foot. 13 warships in pieces on the shoulders of thousands of men climbing away from the ocean. Beyond the mountains, more than a mile above the sea, lay a lake, and on it stood the most beautiful city I ever walked into. The ships were going up to kill it, not to fight ships, to shut off the water. I watched them pass. My name is Cassian Vale. I have been alive for a very long time, long enough to have been there. I keep the things people handed me and never came back for. Tonight, I'll show you one. This is a feather. The green is not a color laid on. It is built in like light into water, and when the light moves, it turns to green fire. Near the quill, a thin print of hardened glue, a workman's thumb. It belonged to Cuauhtemoc, featherworker of Tenochtitlan in Tenochtitlan. His hands were wet with glue when he gave it to me. "Hold this," he said. "It goes at the center of the shield, and I will take it back when the shield is finished." The shield was never finished. Everyone tells this story with 3 words: guns, steel, smallpox, and I concede all 3. I stood in the city through the pox, and what I remember is the quiet of houses where every voice had stopped. But none of the 3 could reach Tenochtitlan, an island ringed, fed, and guarded by water, the strongest wall of its age. And it died of thirst. How does a city die of thirst in the middle of a lake? Before this candle burns down, you will know what they got wrong. I came over those mountains myself 2 years before the ships did and walked in across the southern causeway at dawn. White towers standing in the water twice, once in stone, once in reflection. From the hill of Chapultepec came the one thin miracle, an aqueduct of 2 channels, because the lake around the island was salt and no one could drink it. North lay Tlatelolco, the great market, and behind it Tlan, street of the featherworkers, where Toxcatl kept his bench. His fingertips were glazed from a lifetime of orchid root glue. His craft was patience, plain feathers laid beneath, so one barb of Quetzal could catch a whole morning's light. He taught me the workshop's first law before he taught me his name. In this room, nobody sneezes. He said one thing the way other men say amen. The lake feeds us, and the lake is our wall. I asked what the strangers would pay for such work. He asked what they prized. "Gold," I said. He looked down his bench of green fire and said, dry as a bone blade, that they had crossed an ocean for the dullest thing in the city. One evening, laying a feather like this one, he told me the truer thing. "The Quetzal dies in a cage," he said. "So the catchers take one feather from the living bird and open their hands. Nothing beautiful is kept. It is only borrowed. It is the whole story, and I did not know it yet." He was wrong about the wall. On the 8th of November, 1519, 21 months before the last canoe, and I will come to the last canoe, strangers walked in over that same causeway. A few hundred men in metal, horses, warriors of Tlaxcala. Moctezuma, a careful king, I always thought, trusting his own omens less each year, led their captain Cortes into his father's palace. One of those strangers was a soldier named Bernal Diaz. 50 years later, an old man in Guatemala, he set down that dawn in a plain soldier's hand.
"We were amazed and said that it was like the enchantments they tell of in the legend of Amadis, on account of the great towers and canoes and buildings rising from the water, and all built of masonry. And some of our soldiers even asked whether the things that we saw were not a dream."
Whether the things that we saw were not a dream. The men asking would take the dream apart with their own hands. and by the time Diaz wrote the sentence, the city in it no longer existed to be checked. I have had 500 years, and I still cannot answer him. 15 months before the last canoe came the festival of Toxcatl. I felt the great drum in the stones long before I heard it. Cortes was away at the coast, and a captain named Ahalva-Rah-Do held the city. The nobles were dancing unarmed when Ahalva-Rah-Do's men closed the gates. The elders said the drummer was struck first, his hands and then his neck. The drum stopped mid-beat. The city rose, and when the strangers put Moctezuma on a rooftop to calm it, the calm was over. He died in those days. Stoned by his own people, the Spaniards wrote. Killed by the Spaniards, said the elders. Both sides wrote it down. Neither wrote it clean. It was midsummer. It was raining. On the last night of June, the strangers ran for the mainland over the broken causeway, and Diaz, who was there, says men drowned with gold stuffed inside their shirts. By morning, the city had its victory. It kept it 1 year. The pox arrived in the autumn. The elders counted it in days, 60. I will give you no number of the dead, but it killed Cuauhtemoc, the king who had thrown the Spaniards out 80 days into his reign. In the new year, the city raised Cuauhtemoc, 25 or so. By then, the ring was closing. Cortes came back with an idea he was, I believe, the only one to see whole. The city's wall was water, and a wall of water can be taken from its owners. At Toxcatl, his shipwright built 13 brigantines, took them apart, and thousands of porters carried a navy over the passes to a lake more than a mile above the sea. A navy walking. It was what I watched pass among the pines the morning I stopped saying the small true things and started saying goodbye. 80 days before the last canoe, they cut the water. Raiders broke the aqueduct at Chapultepec. The springs never reached the city again. The lake around the island was brine, sweet only where those springs fed it. Dug wells gave brack. A city with water for streets began to die of thirst. The wall had changed sides. 70 days before the last canoe, the brigantines came out under sail onto a lake covered with war canoes, and by evening, Cortes wrote it himself. The lake was his. Sails against paddles. After that, every night canoe of maize or water was hunted in the dark. Asked long afterward what was eaten, the elders gave the friar a list: lizards, swallows, salt grass, leather, adobe brick. 30 days before the last canoe, the streets began to go. Cortes stopped taking the city and began unbuilding it, every house pulled down, its rubble shoveled into the canal beside it until horses stood where boats had gone. The Spaniards did not capture Tenochtitlan. They filled it in. What was left drew north into Tlatelolco, into the street of the featherworkers. The ring followed. I saw Toxcatl last in early August, thin as everyone was thin, still at the bench, on a shield with no warrior left to carry it. His hands, which the craft had never allowed to shake, were shaking. He lifted this feather on the back of his wrist, the way his guild lifts what must not be touched, and laid it on my palm. "Hold this," he said. "My hands are wet. I will take it back when the shield is finished." I said I would keep it dry. The 13th of August, 1521. A canoe put out onto the open lake that morning, carrying Cuauhtemoc, last king of the Mexica, the people you call the Aztecs, and a brigantine ran it down under sail. There is the last canoe, a young man in a fisherman's boat, run down by a warship that had crossed a mountain range. Brought before Cortes, he laid his hand on the Spaniard's dagger and asked to be killed. Cortes wrote it himself, and Diaz gave him a longer speech. I believe the gesture. The words belong to the tellers. For 3 days, the living walked out along the causeways. A whole people, filed thin, searched for gold as they passed. I walked among them on the Taku Bar causeway, this feather flat against my chest, dry. I stood on the causeway and watched the lake take it back. Toxcatl never came for the feather. Now I owe you the truth the historians insist on, because honesty is what this candle is for. Everything known of those years comes down 3 roads. Cortes, a victor, writing to the employer he needed. Diaz, an old man, remembering a dream 50 years gone. And the voices a friar's scribes wrote down in Tlatelolco a generation later. Grief, remembered where it happened. Cortes claims 40,000 dead in one day. A chronicler of Texcoco says 240,000 in all. Round numbers are the signature of a man arguing something. The famous elegy says, broken spears lie in the roads. Careful readers now argue the word was bones. Even the grief comes to us through a disputed word. So I count what I can. 1 bench, 1 thumbprint, 1 feather. That is the record. Now, the lake. The lake is gone. The city on the rubble spent 3 centuries draining it until the streets of water were a dry plain with a cathedral on it, and Mexico City is sinking into the soft bed of the lake it buried. In 1978, electricians cutting a trench beside the cathedral struck carved stone, and the great temple came back into daylight, steps from where the drum stopped. The lake took the city back, and then the centuries took the lake. Here is what the lake taught me. The city was not undone by what attacked it. It was undone when the thing it trusted changed owners whole. Same water, same obedience. That is what a moat is, a wall that obeys whoever owns the boats. Every age since has been sure it would have seen it coming. Everything that holds you up is a hand that can close, and the roads that bring you everything can bring you anything. 2,000 years of practice at reading the ends of cities, and what I offered Toxcatl was company while the glue dried. He paid the tuition for what I already knew. This is Toxcatl's feather, meant for the center of a shield that was never finished. He was right about the borrowing. The bird gave 1 feather and flew on, and the feather outlived the shield, the empire, and the lake. He was wrong about the wall. I carried it out over water that was taking back everything else, and I have kept it dry for 500 years, because a borrowed thing must be kept fit for returning, and there is no one left to return it to. Nothing beautiful is kept. It is only borrowed. When the light moves, there, green fire. They are gone. The drummer whose hands were struck first, the young king taken from the last canoe, the featherworker with glue on his fingertips. Remember one of them. Toxcatl will do. They are gone, and I am still here to remember them. So now, so are you. Carry them a while. The candle stays lit,